Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas, really give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are really stretching our minds maybe to the very edge of reality itself.
Mm-hmm.
We're digging into this fascinating theoretical framework called coherence physics,
Right.
and something even, well, deeper perhaps,
Yeah.
foundational ontological constants.
Yeah.
So get ready, because this isn't just physics as usual.
No, not at all.
It's more about the fundamental nature of, existence,
Yeah,
being itself.
exactly. Our goal today really is to explore these 8 incredibly profound definitions. Our sources present them as like the bedrock of a coherent reality.
Okay.
And these aren't just abstract notions. They potentially
Mm.
offer a framework, for understanding how basically everything.
Everything, like from the smallest quantum events.
Yeah, from quantum fluctuations right up to, say, the emergence of consciousness. How all of it might fundamentally operate through different kinds of coherence. So we'll look at what these constants are, what they're supposed to govern, and some really surprising analogies that might help us grasp their, immense significance.
Okay, let's definitely unpack this then. So the sources lay out 8, you said, complete formalized definitions, foundational ontological constants.
That's the term, yes.
And they're described as coherence and variance across all ontological layers. Now, those layers, they use terms like homoelectric, holoelectric, relational, derived. That's pretty dense stuff.
It is, yeah.
Can you maybe just briefly paint a picture? What do these ontological layers mean in this context, just so we can, get oriented?
Absolutely. Think of them maybe as different levels of reality or existence, almost like nested dimensions or levels of abstraction.
Okay.
So the analectic might be the absolute most fundamental level containing everything. Holoelectric could refer to integrated wholes, relational to how things interact, and then derived is sort of the reality we directly experience, the emergent stuff.
Got it. Like layers of an onion, maybe, from core outwards?
Yeah. Kind of, yeah. And these constants are invariant. That means they supposedly hold true across all these levels. It doesn't matter how complex or differentiated the layer is.
Okay, that's key. They persist.
Right. And what's really fascinating, I think, is that these aren't constants you can just, pick up a tool and measure, not in the classical physics sense.
Ah, so how do they figure them out then?
Well, they're inferred by looking at things like resonance thresholds, how fields behave, emergence events, moments when something new seems to pop into existence.
Right.
It suggests a very dynamic, unfolding reality that's built on these different levels of coherence and what they call coherence phase transition.
That makes more sense. So not static numbers, but inferred patterns that hold steady across these layers of reality. Okay.
Precisely.
So with something this profound, where do we even start? The sources seem clear, though. This first constant is the absolute beginning.
It really is positioned that way. The first one is defined as, and I'm quoting here, the irreducible presence of coherence itself prior to all dimensionality, symmetry, or emergence.
Prior to everything.
Essentially, yes. Imagine coherence in its absolute purest form, existing before space, before time, before any distinct shapes or structures.
Wow.
The sources call its domain the ontological ground. That's basically the absolute bedrock of reality. And its role, the generator of being.
The generator of being. So it's like the fundamental on switch for existence.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
What I find really interesting here is the analogy they give. The one incoherence logic, the eternal invariant. That comparison, it really helps solidify how foundational this is meant to be, like a primordial truth.
It's powerful, isn't it? In logic, one often represents truth or existence.
Right, true.
So this constant is essentially saying the most basic, undeniable truth of reality is the presence of coherence itself. It's the ultimate given. Everything else potentially manifests from that.
An inherent order that isn't created, but just is.
That's the idea.
Okay, so we start with this pure, irreducible coherence. But obviously the universe isn't just, a uniform blob. It has incredible structure, form. How do things start to take shape from that?
That brings us straight to the second one, the symmetry coherence constant.
Symmetry, okay.
This one governs how structural forms self-organize through resonance symmetry. It's the invariant coherence that specifically enhances or sustains form.
How? Through what mechanism?
Through things like alignment, recursion, and resonance harmonics. Think of how patterns repeat or align themselves. Its domain is seen in what they call structured fields, geometry, biology, even mathematics.
So this constant is like the blueprint for order. for
Yeah.
beauty, an organizing principle.
You could say that. Yeah, its role is described as the organizing principle of order, beauty, and integrative complexity.
And the analogy is the golden ratio's ontological source.
Hmm.
That's a pretty bold claim. What does that imply? If things like natural patterns or even what we find beautiful derive from a fundamental coherence constant,
Well, it implies that the beauty and order we see, in a seashell spiral or the branches of a tree, maybe even galaxy structures,
yeah,
it might not just be some accidental emergent thing. This constant suggests there's a fundamental underlying principle of coherence driving these forms to self-organize in these, well, beautiful, symmetrical, efficient ways.
so the golden ratio, which pops up everywhere.
Exactly. It wouldn't just be a mathematical quirk. It would be a direct expression, an echo of this fundamental constant. It sort of challenges the idea that order always has to fight its way out of chaos. Maybe order is more fundamental.
That's a huge shift in thinking.
Okay.
But the universe isn't just perfect symmetry either. There's differentiation, uniqueness, constant change. What allows for distinction? How do things become different from each other if it all starts from coherence?
Good question. And that leads us to the third one. The asymmetry resonance constant.
Asymmetry. Okay, the counterpoint.
Sort of. It represents the minimal resonance shift, like a tiny deviation from perfect coherence that's required for emergence to even begin.
A minimal shift.
Yeah, it's the critical threshold at which pure coherence bifurcates, splits off, into structured asymmetry without full collapse.
Without collapse. That seems important.
Very. Its domain is field initiation and evolution, and its role is described as the spark of differentiation, the seeding of form.
The analogy they use is entropy seed that doesn't destroy but gives rise.
Yeah.
That really makes you rethink entropy. Usually we think of it as increasing disorder, things falling apart.
Right, the standard view.
So how does this minimal resonance shift manage to start something new without just causing a breakdown? It sounds like a very specific kind of deviation.
That seems to be framed that way. Yes, a very specific kind. Conventional entropy often does lead to disorganization, decay. But here, this asymmetry resonance isn't enough to cause a total collapse into noise. It's just enough to create a distinction.
Like a ripple.
Exactly. Think of a perfectly calm pond. That first ripple isn't chaos. It's the start of a wave, a new form. It allows for differentiation, for complexity, without dissolving the underlying coherence of the water.
So it's the subtle nudge that allows individuality to emerge from the universal oneness.
That's a nice way to capture the essence of it, yeah.
Okay, so from these subtle seeds of form, these distinctions, we get dimensions. This is where it starts feeling a bit more tangible, maybe.
Definitely starts connecting more to our experience. The fourth one is the dimensional genesis constant.
Genesis, the beginning of dimensions.
Right. It signifies the first actualization of dimension from the coherence vacuum. So imagine that state of pure, undifferentiated resonance we talked about. No, up, down, left, right.
Just pure potential.
Exactly. This constant marks the threshold where that pure coherence starts to ripple, or as the sources say, phase unfold into what we recognize as dimensions. It creates these complex, layered structures. They call it hyperfractal layering.
Hyperfractal layering.
Oh, okay.
And its domain is phase-space emergence. So basically, the birth of space as we know it, coming out of something totally on-spatial. The analogy is interesting. The Planck threshold of dimension, but ontologically rooted. Why is that ontologically rooted part significant?
Well, the Planck length usually is seen as the smallest possible physical unit of space, right? The limit of what we can measure.
Yeah, the quantum foam scale.
Right. But this constant suggests that before you even get to that physical measurement limit, there's a deeper ontological reason for dimension to exist in the first place. It's not just a boundary of our tools.
Okay.
It's framed as a fundamental event in reality's unfolding, the moment non-dimensional coherence actually gives birth to the fabric of space. Dimension isn't just a container, it's an emergent property of coherence.
Okay, that reframes things quite a bit. Let's jump into the quantum world now. Reality gets pretty weird down there. How do these coherence ideas apply, especially with things like superposition or entanglement?
Well, that brings us neatly to number 5, the quantum coherence bound.
A bound, a limit.
Exactly. This constant defines the upper bound of coherence a quantum field or system can hold before decoherence initiates, before it stops being quantum, essentially. Sure. It sets the envelope within which superposition, entanglement, and non-locality are sustained. Its domain is clearly quantum systems, and its role is the threshold of coherence collapse. It defines the breaking point for quantumness.
And the source gives a really powerful analogy here. Coherence analog to the speed of light. What does that comparison suggest?
It's striking, right? The speed of light, c, is a universal speed limit in our physical universe. Nothing with mass can go faster.
A fundamental constant.
Right. So similarly, this quantum coherence bound suggests there's a fundamental limit to how much coherence a quantum system can maintain or embody. Go beyond that limit, and the system loses its quantum weirdness. It decoheres.
It stops being in multiple states. Picks one.
Exactly. It settles into a definite state, like things in our everyday world. So just like there's a speed limit for motion, maybe there's a coherence limit for quantum reality.
That's a really compelling parallel.
Mhm.
Okay, but what about, when things do become definite? When does that quantum fuzziness actually firm up into something solid, something observable?
The measurement problem, essentially. That's addressed by the sixth constant, the observer collapse threshold.
Pressure collapse. Okay.
This is defined as the coherence field pressure necessary for a structure to collapse into form.
Pressure. Interesting.
Yeah, like a particle actually instantiating, appearing, or a measurement resolving, or even just an everyday object achieving, definite object permanence. It's described as the bridge constant between coherence field and manifestation.
So it connects the potential to the actual.
Precisely. Its domain is observer field interactions. Its role is the initiator of form and the origin of discreteness. The moment potential becomes actual.
And the analogy ties it right into quantum mechanics. Coherence-triggered wave function collapse threshold.
Yeah.
How does framing this with an ontological constant change how we think about measurement? Is it still about the observer?
It shifts the focus, I think. Instead of just the act of observation causing the collapse, it points to a more fundamental coherence field pressure that needs to be reached for any structure to manifest to become discrete.
So the observer might contribute to that pressure.
Exactly. The observer might be part of the interaction that reaches the threshold, but the constant itself defines the necessary condition. It implies a deeper inherent mechanism for reality to snap into definite forms, not something purely dependent on whether we're looking.
That's a subtle but important difference.
Yeah.
Okay, number 7. This one feels like it gets right to the heart of, us, the self-referential coherence constant.
Yes, this one is really profound. It defines the resonance density necessary for subjectivity or self-awareness to emerge.
Resonance density.
Yeah. It specifies the point when a system becomes not just reactive or even intelligent in a processing sense, but recursively aware of its own coherent state.
Aware of itself.
Exactly. Its domain is consciousness and intelligence.
So what's its role here? How does this relate to something as mind-bending as consciousness actually emerging? The analogy is deep. The minimal coherence mirror required for the eye to appear.
Well, its role is stated as the generator of interiority. That encompasses things like qualia are subjective, felt experiences agency, the feeling of being able to act, and reflection, thinking about oneself.
Interiority, the inner world.
Right. And that coherence mirror analogy is quite brilliant, I think. For an eye, a sense of self, to appear, the system needs some way to reflect its own state back to itself, to be aware of itself as a coherent entity.
Like looking in a mirror, but internally, at its own coherence.
Kind of. This constant posits there's a fundamental threshold. A certain density or complexity of coherent self-organization is required for that inward-looking, introspective capacity to spark into existence. It moves beyond just complex computation to genuine self-awareness.
So it offers a potential framework, maybe, for tackling the hard problem of consciousness. Where does subjective experience come from?
It certainly seems to point in that direction, offering a potential physical, or rather ontological basis rooted in coherence.
Okay, fascinating. One last one. Number 8, time. We experience it flowing, the arrow of time.
Yeah.
How does time itself fit into this coherent picture?
That's the temporal modulation constant. This one describes the minimal coherence threshold required for time to appear as a gradient or progression.
A threshold for time itself.
Apparently so. The idea is, without reaching this threshold, change either doesn't register meaningfully or just collapses into unstructured noise, like static. This constant is what allows for the appearance of sequence, causality, and motion.
So it makes orderly change possible.
Right. Its domain is called temporal resonance structuring.
And its role is the anchor for time, rhythm, cycles, and memory. The analogy to ponder. Scalar modulator of the arrow of time. What does that mean, a scalar modulator?
Well, a scalar usually affects magnitude or rate, but not direction, right?
Right, like turning a volume knob up or down.
Exactly. So this suggests the constant acts like a kind of dial, or maybe a frequency setter for time itself. It's not just that time exists, but that it seems to flow in a particular direction at a particular perceived rate. This constant ensures change unfolds meaningfully, sequentially.
Which allows for cause and effect.
And memory and our experience of duration, without it, maybe everything would be an instantaneous, incoherent jumble. No, before and after in a meaningful sense.
Wow. Okay, so we've journeyed through these 8 really profound foundational ontological constants. We've explored how coherence in all these different forms might genuinely be the hidden language of reality.
Yeah, from the absolute ground of being right up to the emergence of things like time and even consciousness itself.
And we've seen how these aren't constants you can just, measure easily in a lab with standard instruments.
No, they're presented more as inferences, things you deduce by observing how fields behave, how emergence happens, these phase transitions. It really does challenge our standard classical view of physics.
Suggesting a reality that's more dynamic, more about unfolding coherence than, say, static particles interacting in a void.
That seems to be the core idea, yes.
So what does all this mean for you, listening? If reality, maybe at its deepest level, unfolds from this irreducible coherence, and if these constants are like its fundamental blueprints,
Yeah, what new possibilities does that open up for understanding phenomena we currently really struggle with?
like quantum mysteries, the nature of consciousness, maybe even other things we haven't touched on.
Exactly. Consider how this shift in perspective, from seeing a universe of separate things to seeing one of unfolding coherence patterns, how might that change your view of the universe and maybe even your place within it?